سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Welcome to the fifth lecture in our series here in this course, Applied Linguistics. In this lecture, we'll be talking about a number of issues regarding this field, Applied Linguistics in particular, and linguistics in general, and other maybe fields if we have time. In this lecture, we'll shed light into a very important issue about the, theories that we talked about, the communicative competence, which was the last actually theory or approach we talked about, the grammar translation method, natural approach, the direct method. Actually, knowing the grammar and vocabulary of the language, that is to say, the grammar translation method, although essential, is one thing, but being able to put them to use involves other types of knowledge and ability as well. So here, in fact, we are talking about another level of difficulty that learners face when learning the language. And they have actually to show us proficiency, not just in grammar and memorizing lists of vocabulary. No, we want them to be able to use that language. So here we have suggested, according to this book, a number of factors here that have to be mentioned for you here in this course. So we've got linguistic competence. So isolating the formal systems of language, i.e. its pronunciation, grammar and vocabulary, either for learning or for analysis, is a useful first step. It's fine. There is nothing wrong with it. If I want to teach my students, a language, I can teach these actually, sub-skills separately. So pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, that's fine. But the adoption of traditional language teaching methods need not imply that this is all that learning a language involves, but only that a sound knowledge of the rules and an accurate and the slow deployment of them is the basis for further development. So this is not the whole process, of language learning. When you say that I want to teach my students grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary, that's fine, but is this the whole thing? No. You want them, your target or your goal is to have them speak that language. And they wouldn't be able to do it because you did not let them practice it. You did not prepare them for that aim that you wanted to achieve later on. Therefore, this has come actually, the linguistic competence. This has come from theoretical linguistics in the work of Noam Chomsky, a very famous figure in linguistics and the theoretical linguistics in particular. His idea is that the human capacity for language, as illustrated by a child's acquisition of the language around them, is not the product of general intelligence or learning ability, but an innate, genetically determined feature of the human species. So, you are speaking that language, you have learned that language, not because you have something, not because you are intelligent, not because you are actually interacting with people around you. No, it's because there is something innate in your genetics, in your genes, that was triggered, that actually made you able to speak that language. So it is something biological rather than social. It's not the social context. It's not the people who are around you. It is you who have become a competent person in that language. And then you started to speak or write. And this capacity for language, for learning the language or language, is the result of biological issues rather than social factors. He is saying further on here that we are born with considerable pre-programmed knowledge of how language works and require only minimal exposure to activate our connection to the particular language around us. So it is there in our minds, waiting for exposure, waiting for my, for example, father or your father or mother or friends or any people around you to speak with you. It is pre-programmed, which means it is there. This knowledge is innate, is pre-programmed. You are born with it. It needs only minimal exposure, not that much. It doesn't need a lot of exposure. It needs only minimal exposure to the language or to the people in order to be activated. So in his view, Chomsky's view, the newborn infant brain already contains a universal grammar, the UG, which forms the basis of competence in the particular language the child goes on to speak. So you have also the grammar in your own mind. If we accept this view, language as an object of academic inquiry becomes something more biological, as I said at the beginning, rather than social. And similarities between languages outweigh differences. All languages will be learned in the same way. Why? Because you've got here something in your mind. This is what is going to help you to speak the language. It is there, waiting for any moment to, to take a place or to happen. Language learning is awaiting, the minimal exposure or the period of time in which you will be ripe to speak that language or to be able to write or to speak. Even to produce some words in the language. So it is something biological. It is to do with your genes. It is to do with your brain. It is to do with your, when you are ready for it. It has very little to do. It has very little thing to do, with the people around you. Minimal exposure only. So this is Chomsky's view of language learning and acquisition. We have actually another type of competence that has been actually introduced in contrast, as a deliberate contrast to Chomsky's linguistic competence. A very famous sociolinguist, Delheims, offered communicative competence in the late 1960s. And he observes that a person who had only linguistic competence would be quite unable to communicate. Linguistic competence is not going, I know the language, I know how to use that language, or I've got, at least I'm competent in that language, but I don't know how to use it. In terms, linguistically speaking, I'm good, but I haven't got the communicative skills needed to carry out the social activities or to participate with people in the context where the language is used. So linguistic competence is not enough to make people speak. They would be a kind of social monster, producing grammatical sentences unconnected to the situation in which they occur. So we produce actually sentences which are not or accepted in that context, which I mean people are not going to you will sound like you are speaking I mean as if you are a computer, for example. You have stored data and you are just saying them. You don't take care of the context in which you are speaking in. So this is the reason why linguistic competence is not enough. You have something in your mind, okay, you say it, that's good, you've said it. It could be grammatically correct, but in terms of appropriateness, an issue which we are going to discuss later on, inshallah, you are not using the appropriate language which should be used in that context. What is needed, in fact, for successful communication, Himes suggested, is 4 types of knowledge. Number 1, possibility. Number 2, feasibility. 3, appropriateness. Number 4, attestedness. We are going to consider each one of them separately. We'll have a look at what we mean by possibility here. A communicatively competent speaker knows what is formally possible in a language, i.e. whether an instance conforms to the rules of grammar and pronunciation. They know, for example, that me go sleep now transgresses these rules, while I'm going to sleep now does not. So knowledge of grammar is fine. You know that this is not correct. Me go to sleep now, or me go sleep now. You know that this sentence or this phrase should be actually corrected. But is knowledge of possibility sufficient? No. According to this actually theory, knowledge of possibility is not sufficient in itself for communication. You know it is possible, but you need something more. In saying, for example, I'm going to sleep now, may be grammatical, meaningful, and correctly pronounced, but it is not necessarily the right thing to do, or to say, sorry. To say, it is not necessarily the right thing to say. Whereas me go sleep now, although wrong, in terms of grammar, may be both meaningful and appropriate. It is meaningful. I have communicated meaning. I can understand that you want to go to sleep. You want to go to bed. You want to sleep. It is appropriate. You've used it in a context in which, for example, you need to sleep. So it's time, it's bedtime, and you want to sleep. You say this. This is appropriate. In addition, a communicative competent speaker may know the rules, be capable of following them, but nevertheless break them deliberately. That was a hard day's night. This is an example. You are a good speaker, a very competent speaker in your language, but the problem, and you know the rules, but the problem is that you tend to break them. You want to sound creative, you want to sound funny sometimes, you use such actual expressions. That was hard night. Okay, it was hard day's night. It's a bit weird. Another actually issue is possibility enough for me to carry out or for successful communication? No. Possibility, knowing that this sentence is possible, is not the only thing that I need. No, I need also feasibility. A communicatively competent person knows what is feasible. This is a psychological concept concerned with limitations to what can be processed by the mind, and is best illustrated by an example. So what is feasible is what is easy to use, what sounds fine with people, in terms of difficulty here, and sometimes even creating complicated structures or utterances. So in saying that the cheese was green, the cheese the rat ate was green, the cheese the rat the cat chased ate was green, the cheese the rat the cat the dog saw chased ate was green, the cheese the rat the cat the dog the man beat saw chased ate was green. All of these sentences are possible if we are talking about possibilities or possibility. But if we are talking about them in terms of their feasibility, they are not easy, they are not feasible. So the last two sentences may be possible, but they are not feasible. They do not work, that's it. Not because they are ungrammatical, but because they are so difficult to process. Somebody tells you this: the cheese, the rat, the cat, the man beat, saw, ate, chased was green. What's this? You are making it more complicated. You are making it difficult on me to process. Okay, so how many people are involved in this event or incident or whatever you are saying or trying to express? So this is actually an important point that you've got to remember. Feasibility is an issue that we need to consider in our communication, or in order to have at least a successful communication. Being a competent speaker means that in the language means that you have to attain or you have to achieve these four components. You've got to be able to achieve possibility, feasibility, attestedness, and we are going to look at the fourth issue that we have looked at, which is appropriateness. This is what I wanted actually to say in this lecture with respect to the communicative, to the linguistic competence and the communicative competence here. We will, inshallah, later on in other lectures try to talk and to shed light on other issues which are going to be appropriateness and attestedness. I wish you all the best, and thanks a lot for listening to this lecture. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.